Okay, cool. All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Matthew, my real life TV 505. I'm here with Cullen, and we're here chilling with Cullen from Everest Apothecary, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sometimes I mess that word up.
South Valley store.
South Valley store, that's right. That one's gonna be over there on Central, west of Atrisco, next to Little Caesars. You really can't miss it unless you try to. You can't miss it. So I'm so thankful that I got you here today. It's great to come down with us and do an interview. I'm super excited and nervous at the same time. I kind of shakes my
Be nervous.
I think now that it's on, I'm like, oh, I'm super excited. This is so awesome. Really, I appreciate this.
Hey, thank you, boss. Thank
really,
you.
it means a lot. So I brought him by to hang out with me basically today. We're gonna have a medicated session. So I got some hybrid shake here that I picked up.
A nice Everest lighter.
That's right. Don't forget to make a referral and go down to Everest and pick up your goodie bag for your referrals too. Go in with your referral.
Yes, please.
All right. So we found some hybrid here.
Thank you, good sir. Hey, patient to patient, I appreciate you having me here in your home today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That sounds good already.
That first hit hit me sick.
Yeah.
Told you I'm excited.
No, trust me. Believe me, I was looking forward to this all day.
Yeah.
It's not very rare that I actually get invited to this kind of stuff, so thank you. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for participating. So basically, so how I met Cullen was through Everest. I was through Ron. I went through Everest, and I tend to frequent there a lot. It's close to home, and everybody there makes you feel like you're at home as soon as you walk through the door. And so they've always had a real good strain of flower for me to choose from. They've always had some pre-rolls there for me, some edibles. I always had something there for one of my symptoms. And the staff has always been so helpful. That's why it's actually.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I forgot.
I didn't want like ash on your table.
Yeah, no worries. I forgot the ashtray. That's I was trying to get all prepared.
Good one.
But so we met over at Harvest Fest. If you seen that video that I had posted a while back, we did meet at Harvest Fest, and they put on a heck of an event for everybody. Like I said, it felt like a family backyard barbecue. So I do have a few questions for you today, man. I know a lot of new patients would probably be asking. This is just what do you think of
This
that?
is beautiful. Whose is this?
This was a gift.
Oh!
Yeah, it was a gift. So they didn't even tell me. They're just like, hey, brother, I got some gift for you. I was like, all right, cool. They brought me some shake, and I was like, I'm cool with some gifted shake.
Thank God for gifting.
Yeah, they said it's a hybrid, and I was like, I'm cool with hybrids. I'm all about the balance. So, Cullen, tell me a little bit about yourself and the experiences you've had in working in cannabis in New Mexico.
Going on 6-7 years right now. About this time I started up in Santa Fe, northern New Mexico. I've worked for about 4 going on 5 different dispensaries here in New Mexico right now at Everest. So some of y'all have seen me at Sacred Garden, some of y'all have seen me at Shift, some of you have seen me at Fruit of the Earth, now Everest. Who knows what's to come for the future, but I think I'm definitely a person that patients feel they can connect with or trust when at least comes to seeing me behind a counter in a dispensary somewhere. They know I'm simply not just trying to sell you whatever I can. I'm actually there to help you. So doesn't matter what dispensary I'm working for. I'm also kind of doing different things. I'm also helping training with canna staffing right now, for helping different people get in the industry or just learn more about our industry. We do have our canna staffing open house this Friday. Come be there. Santa Claus will be there. Great friends, kid activities. But
where's that going to be at?
It's going to be at the Free Range Center off Central. The office building is right across from UNM, where the canna staffing offices are. It'll be a fun time for everyone.
Awesome, man. Santa's going to be there, huh?
Hey, Santa's going to be there, so bring the little ones.
That's awesome, man. Hey, I got a little bit of wind playing around in the back here. I don't want it to interfere. Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn that thing down.
Good stuff. Do good, sir. I'm glad you were the sound expert, not myself.
Well, so I've worked in a few different fields where you use multiple senses, and so like I hear things that people don't tend to hear, or I'll see things people tend to not see.
Working in a dispensary, I feel like my 2 biggest senses I have to use are my vision of what's going on around me,
at all
and
times.
then my smell. Does the smell right? Right.
Because you gotta know who's coming through that door. You gotta know what's going on with that patient across the way. This patient here.
Very true, good sir.
So, man, so you've been in the field for a long time, and you've had quite the experience. And
I'm one of our probably veterans in the industry. I know that in New Mexico we don't have a good history with staff retention at different dispensaries. Unfortunately, it takes a lot for a person to make it multiple years and still remain in this industry and not just become burnt out or too overburdened by your work that you don't take that out on your patients.
Yeah.
It really does take, and I mean, certain people like myself, I think we even notice all the people that have been around for anything longer than 4 years because it's not common. It really is.
Well, see, that was one of my big questions too. Is like, so I know as a patient, I've been in that waiting area and I've seen some other patients throw fits over things that to me myself, I feel like real minor things. I mean, and I've seen you guys handle it pretty well. I mean, really, I mean, how do you guys really? I mean, I'm sure you get burnt out with patients who come in all the time with these high expectations that are like that they see on a music video or something.
No, I can understand that, and honestly, it's I understand that there's a lot of unrealistic expectations that patients have of stepping foot into a dispensary for the first time, what kind of service they can expect or what kind of products they can see, but quite honestly, there's multiple problems with the way that our program is, especially when it comes to a brand new patient receiving their medical cannabis card. Yeah. Some of them have never been spoken to about cannabis from their primary doctor or nurse before they were just written this prescription. Some of them had no in-depth conversation about how to dose, how to medicate. They were simply given this card, had a very basic conversation about it with their qualifying practitioners or physician.
And maybe came in with knowledge that they had prior.
Exactly, and I mean, quite frankly, I feel that our cannabis nurses and doctors that actually do provide those services like NM420 Connect or AIM Health Services or Zia Health and Wellness, I feel like they're doing a better job of educating their prospective patients about what are the realities of what you can see in a dispensary, what you can expect for dosage. They're doing a better job on that when it's the actual doctors and specialists that have no cannabis affiliation. They're doing a worse job of preparing their patients for our program, and we see this all the time in the dispensary. So when we see patients upset or we see them not understanding a concept of, hey, this is dispensary 101, we have to take into consideration they don't know any better, they've never been inside, so sure, we may know, and it can come down to something small like a first-time patient, because you know how we serve deli style, like with our big jars, so a lot of patients think it's appropriate to reach your hand into a jar or even grab the jar away from the bud tender, and if you are a patient, please don't ever do that. It can be very unsafe for the bud tending staff and also kind of set a dangerous precedent of medication and controlled substance handling, so just
sanitary issues.
Totally, always ask your bud tender or technician if it's okay if you touch the flower or the jar. That's just kind of a proper. I know a lot of dispensaries have security and doormen, and if they see you grabbing for product like that, that could also kind of escalate a situation there. But and it's just those little things where we know something like that can happen, and believe me, it does day after day. We just have to react appropriately and try and not offend someone by being like, hey, this isn't kind of the cannabis dispensary etiquette way of that we do things. So it makes it a little hard because we don't want to be rude, we don't want to be harsh, we don't want to be seen as like unfriendly, but at the same time we've got to keep a certain level of decorum, I think, as patients.
It's really like anything in life. You want to take into consideration other people. You really want to, like when you have a patient come through that door, it's a patient. I mean, that patient could be going in there with chronic pain. They could be going in there with a mental issue. Yes. Whatever it is, they're going in to medicate, and they're coming to you for it, right? So I guess like with anything, even when I worked selling motorcycles, it was like, hey, that something could have just happened to that patient, and you don't want to add on to it. It's about the way you react.
And the way you handle them, your energy. Energy is so important in how you come across to people sometimes. And
definitely.
I mean, I think all of us that work in dispensaries, we know our most common condition is PTSD. So, I mean, we are fully aware and we know how to look for those signs when people are maybe triggered or they need to kind of just be in a more like calm state or in a, you know, like, hey, you need some water. Like
body language speaks a lot.
Totally. I think we've all dealt with that one bud tender who looks at you, talks to you, shows you things, and then you've had that one bud tender that looks away from you, kind of looks at the clock, looks at the line of people out in the lobby, like they're not looking at you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're more like, how long till I get out of here kind of thing. But I think it's like you said, some of those ones that don't tend to make it more than that 4 years in the industry, correct?
It's very true, and honestly, We have patients to think a lot of that. For the feedback that we as dispensary like managers like myself, I know that I love to hear back from a patient with a service that was less than their expectations, because honestly that's a training opportunity for me, or it tells me that something's not right in my dispensary that I need to fix.
And if it's happening with one person, how many people could it be happening with?
Exactly. Or if it's a specific bud tender over and over. I mean, quite frankly, I know that we're all heavy into social media these days, our generation is, so we're very quick to Yelp or put a review on Google or something. Quite honestly, one thing that we need to take back from a previous generation, I think, is more talking to each other face to face, especially when it involves a problem like that or a customer service issue. I feel like I've had to deal with so many customer service issues online through social media before I've ever even heard from a patient by voice or by email or by text, or even heard about the situation. So in this day of online reviewing where it's just so fast for a good or negative review,
next thing you know, you're hearing something from another customer or another patient about, man, someone was bashing you on Facebook, and you're like, what?
And honestly, to help our dispensaries improve here in New Mexico, we've got to bring that level of communication back in. And if our dispensaries, if we expect them to serve better, be better.
You know what I love about what I'm doing with my channel is I've faced so much oppression and discrimination in my life that there's no reason for me to oppress or discriminate against anyone else. So like when it comes to dispensaries, we all have our favorites, we all do. But I'm not going to speak bad on any single one of the single dispensaries that we have out here, because they're all out here providing us patients with what we need. It's up to you to figure out which dispensary is going to work best for you. And there's nothing wrong with choosing one over the other. What's when it goes wrong is when you start bashing, when you start bad mouthing, when you start trashing. I mean, that's something in our entire state we need to just get over. We need to just be more positive. We need to be supportive, not discourage, but encourage. We need to encourage each dispensary, like he said, to communicate, come together, unite as one, and share. Because this is one community, and this community is getting big, and it's growing absolutely rapid out here. Fast.
Very.
I've noticed that.
We're having a lot of people coming from out of state, more Californians, and I mean, now that we allow out-of-state patients into our program, even, I don't know if anyone's watching the DOH report statistics, out-of-state keeps jumping. So from that first 8 patients that we had out-of-state on their report, it's now, I believe, over 150.
When did that start?
Started earlier this year, I believe. Someone also correct me if I'm wrong.
So somebody from Phoenix,
Arizona, any other state actually can come here
and be like, hey, here's my medical card. It's like they do kind of like in Vegas, when I went up to Vegas, Nevada. You should basically show them your medical card and get a discount from another state.
It's really nice. Even some places in Colorado will do that for New Mexico patients.
Yeah, it was pretty. I felt pretty. It was pretty.
I know with Arizona, Oklahoma, you have to apply with their DOH for a temporary card, I think, in their states, but you can also use their programs from an out-of-state.
That's what I heard about Arizona, is that you could use their program when I was out of state. You have to do passing that law.
Honestly, it's more amazing that more cannabis states are seeing some kind of reciprocity between each other, because we know that your condition, my condition, does not disappear between some imaginary state lines.
Exactly. And if I could go across the border with my opiate prescription pain medication, why the hell can't I take my cannabis along with me? You know what I mean? That doesn't make sense.
You can take way more lethal controlled substances with you from a doctor across state lines than you can cannabis, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about that too. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, so going back to referring to some of the patients when they go back through that door. I mean, when a patient comes to you with certain symptoms and side effects, things like that going on to them, how exactly do you go about directing them in the right direction to the right medication, the right flower, concentrate, edible, suppository, whatever it may be? How do you help that patient? How do you guide them?
One thing for sure that everyone in our state really needs to get a little bit more online with the cannabis industry, just as a whole in our nation right now. We need to get back into the habit of not going beyond our scope of practice, or basically that means beyond our knowledge of understanding. We say this in the healthcare field all the time. Basically, we don't have people that aren't nurses or doctors acting like they're not nurses or doctors. So we can't really have a bud tender at the counter. It's not appropriate to be like, yeah, this oil is going to cure your cancer. Or, yeah, if you need sleep, this will make you sleep the whole night long. Those statements you can't actually back up, and you're giving false hopes to patients. And
so you get more of a suggestion,
it has to really be guided. You have to really talk with your patient, and some patients need a 30-minute, hour-long consultation their first time in a dispensary. Quite frankly, I worry about those patients that don't get that type of attention their first time in a dispensary, but they need to just talk about, okay, what are you trying to actually
goal for your symptom relief here? Like, what is it pain? Is it nausea? Like, what are we trying to do? And I know at Everest we can look a lot at our terpene education, our terpene labeled products, and we can link a lot of those expected symptom relief goals from how those terpenes are known to have those side effects of them. But when it comes to other things where it's just a little more difficult, normally that's when even we as a dispensary will outreach to Ask a Nurse New Mexico, Gina Lucero, Charlie Secco, all those amazing nurses that are really giving their time. A lot of different agencies, different groups, advocacy groups, medical groups do all different kinds of education and outreach for patients. So it's important that dispensaries keep up with their education for patients to kind of let them know this is more of an understanding about the product. I know a lot of patients come into dispensaries with the expectation of a pharmacy product at the end of the day, or an expected pharmacy result product, and usually there is some trial and error we have to talk about, or note keeping, keeping track of your log of how you medicate, what works for you. So many patients will blindly just keep coming in and purchasing medication without
being self-conscious or self-aware.
Oh yes, totally. And I feel like in those situations it's harder for us because I feel like they're wasting their money, and our medication is not cheap by any means in our program. So we all want you to spend your money by how it's best going to help you with your symptom relief goals. If you're coming in and you're just buying thing after thing that's not working for you, it's not making you happy as a patient with your service or your product, and you're not getting the right interaction from us as a dispensary. So we have to give that level of interaction to make sure that patients that are coming with very specific goals, first of all, can we actually do something to help you? Do we need to escalate this or get more medical professionals involved, like our doctors at 420 Connect, or the people of Ask a Nurse? I mean, just people that we know will have that medical expertise that can also come in with us and be like, okay, this is kind of the therapeutic goals or the scheduling we're going to look at, or the dosage we're going to start at. And a lot of those patients can get a little bit more of a benefit sometimes, especially our elderly patients and our minor patients.
Or even your chronically ill
ill patients I've noticed too, with TMIs, head injuries, that also sometimes don't fully comprehend everything or just can't remember everything at the counter, because a first-time dispensary visit, we all know, can be so overwhelming.
Oh yeah, you get so excited.
Oh, it's exciting. It's too much to remember, so you're
getting free shit.
Oh yeah, like, it's way too much. So I know for those patients that are coming in and do need that medical service, it's about really taking it seriously and realistically of what we can do for them.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because me as a patient, I've been in the program going on 3 years now, and I've been using American cannabis to treat myself for a long time. But I've been a member of this program, and it's like you said, for me, I have a chronic illness, and I've had a very hard time in the last couple of years figuring out how to medicate myself. It's been very up and down, drops, been using the drops, been using the flower, the concentrates, everything you can think of. Even edibles, taking too much, taking too little, crashing at the end of the day. So finally, you do have to figure out that balance for yourself. It's important to take a lot. It is important. I have a log here inside of my notebook about all the flower that I've been getting with all the milligrams, all the edibles I've been eating with all the milligrams on them, the times, the dosages. And I've even used this for suggestions for cancer patients at the cancer centers who have asked me, man, how do I take an edible, man? I ate a piece the other day and I ended up sleeping the rest of the day. And it's like, look, man, you don't have to take that whole little square chocolate piece. You could break that little chocolate piece into fours. And it's basically like you fill it up in your pill bottle and it'll look the same.
Exactly, save your money.
Yeah, really. And microdose yourself before you overdose yourself.
Yes, a lot of patients start off at a really high dose, and yet again, it just comes back to that lack of interaction between the person that gave them that prescription.
The education, the knowledge, exactly.
Yes, and I mean, why would we allow any other medical patient to walk into a pharmacy and be like, sure, I've got Vicodin dosage 5 milligrams through 1,000.
Which one would you
like? I know, that's...
When you get home, take it all and see if that works for you.
I know, tell me how it goes. Like,
here's a can of here's some Narcan, by the way, too, before I forget.
No, totally, and that's something that I think we all pay attention to as patients, like going into a dispensary, and it's just like, even as a first time, how do they talk to you? Like, do they ask you what you're there for?
Do they care about you as a patient?
Yes, or is it simply just, what can I get for you today?
What do you want?
What do you want to buy?
Are you just here to get high?
Yes.
And I really like that about Everest. I like that about a lot of the dispensaries out here. They really have stepped it up in making it a lot more personal. I know a few dispensaries out there that they have a separate room where a new patient who doesn't even have a card yet can come in and say, I would like a consultation with a bud tender or whoever, and they'll do that.
Yeah.
Is that something Everest offers?
Not-
If they're staffed well enough. 'Cause I know sometimes.
I know some locations are a little bit differently with our traffic and how busy we can be. I know right now we don't, but I know quite frankly myself personally and a lot of the people that I personally would hire, they would not say no to a patient asking them more questions. And if they don't know an answer, I get everyone in the habit. This is something I learned in nursing years back. If you don't know the answer, get someone else on your team who knows the answer or can help that person.
Exactly.
Don't just try and let your ego or whatever knowledge
Don't
you think.
dismiss or misguide.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We can't do that. This is a medical environment. That wouldn't be acceptable in a hospital, a
Yeah,
doctor's
exactly.
office. So, I mean, we have to keep, yet again, that type of medical decorum.
The mentality.
Yes,
Exactly.
and that's super important to patients getting the relief they need.
And talking more about new patients and things like that, I know there's been a lot. I've even had some great areas here when it comes to gifting. How exactly does that work? Like, I know as patients we're sitting here sharing a J, so obviously that's okay.
Yes, this is okay. There was gifted medication to you, which you then gifted some to me,
Yes.
and there was no money involved in this transaction, and that's a main stipulation of the gifting is that there can be no money compensation allowed in this. I've seen some people online offering or trading products like a T-shirt for this or something. Be wary when you're involving money in gifting. Law enforcement in New Mexico actively looks at social media, so play it smart as a patient. By all means, our program is still not that big by any means, but definitely with gifting, it's a great way for patients to save money. Lower income patients who can't afford medication. I mean,
Good
rural
way to help
patients.
each other out.
Oh, always, and
Yeah.
quite frankly, we've always had some great humanitarians in our community that when we've honestly had terminal or dying patients at dispensaries, I know over the years I've been able to reach out to certain people in our community and just be like, hey, I've got a person, they probably don't have 2 or 3 more months to live, but we need to make them as comfortable as possible. I need oil and joints, just massive oil and
Or
massive
body
joints
rub
rolled.
or whatever.
Yeah, salve, whatever I'm needing for that, capsules, whatever I'm needing for that person. And we've had some amazing people come forward and step in for patients that are not going to be rather long with us, but more so New Mexicans stepping in for other New Mexicans, and that's something that warms my heart and keeps me in this industry every day, because not only do I see like the love that every person in the dispensary puts forward from our side of the counter, I see it patient to patient, and that's something that gifting is one of those wonderful things that honestly patients have been doing in New Mexico before the DOH allowed it, but this just kind of made it more legitimate and
Or like even sharing information inside the dispensary with each other. I've noticed like other patients will be like, bro, this is what's worked for me. You know, I heard you mentioning to the bud tender this, and it's none of my business, but this is what helped me out. And a lot of other patients I've noticed are real open. They're like, oh my god, dude, yeah, I'm gonna try it.
It's good to talk. I think help each other. I know some dispensaries have a different culture of how they want their bud tenders to be or how they want them to talk to patients, and some keep it very scripted, believe it or not, which is kind of terrifying. It's not organic. But
I'm not a script person.
it's not good for patient relationships. I think people can tell when you're not being authentic or real with them.
Oh,
I know I can. Yeah, I know.
I could tell when you're sales pitching me.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
It's that Disney smile. But
Oh yeah, or it's just like that little phrase that just got tossed in at the end, and you're just like, did you teach you that this morning?
Exactly. It's more of an upsell opportunity, but not a "how are you today" kind of
yeah,
opportunity
more like
with
an
your
add
patient.
on. Like, let's see what we can add on.
Exactly with that, and I don't know. I don't know. It's a lot of love. Gifting is wonderful. I hope we see more patient-friendly things like social consumption sites or lounges or things of that nature to come our way.
Bars and stuff.
That would be very nice. I know a lot of states are having problems with it. California, Colorado, even Nevada. So it's got to be one of those things where there's a lot of trial and error to be worked out, and there's so much overregulation when it comes to social consumption.
Yeah.
The biggest reason is because people drive to those sites. So then if they're driving away from them, they're technically...
Well, it's just like going to the bar, I guess, right? So
Yeah.
it's like you're sitting at the bar, you're having a drink socially.
I know Nevada had some luck with those party buses where you can just get on them. They have a driver with separate ventilation that's sealed out, and then everyone's just consuming and they're not driving. So
that sounds like a good time. I mean, like there's even been events that I wanted to host as well, where it would be about a group of parents sitting together discussing being patients and parenting. There's a lot of stereotypes to it, and so I think we're headed in that direction.
Yes.
Especially if patients collaborate more together, we're headed in that direction.
We've got to be more as a community. I know we don't see a lot of that for some reason. We have a tendency not to work with each other sometimes when it comes to different dispensaries or different industry people or representatives.
There's some competition there.
I know everyone's gearing up for competition with recreation or adult use. Sorry, adult use, I need to stop saying recreation. But the thing more importantly is just that we've got to work together right now because we've got to be always looking after our patients, everything for our patients. That's what matters in our program. Even when adult use comes, that's a whole different thing. So right now we're solely patient focused. I know some dispensaries don't even let their bud tenders honestly inform patients about their rights to grow or even educate them, and that really affects me personally because I had to grow years personally because I could not afford the amount of medicine I needed from a dispensary even when I worked at one. So it was something where for my condition I had to grow and produce my own oils. And as a patient and someone from a dispensary, in every dispensary I've worked at, I have always informed patients. I will give you an application. I will tell you how to fill it out. Yes. I will tell you everything you need to know about your PPL and how you can even qualify to waive your fee if you're on any type of state assistance. So
we're definitely going to be talking more about that. Maybe we can collaborate later on another day and actually make a video on that.
We totally can. I honestly, a lot more patients...
I need to get a PPL, seriously.
A lot more patients need to know about their grow rights in this state, and quite frankly, it's a great way to save money in the long run if you can.
I know that. Now, can some patients grow something very quality and test 100% test quality? Oh. Can they sell that to a dispensary?
I don't know about that.
Does that work in this state like it does in California?
I don't think like California right now. I know we've had some changing to the NMAC where it talks about some possible PPL situations between dispensaries. Yes. From what I understand, a lot of these people that are doing these secondary off-site farms for dispensaries kind of have to be essentially employees of the dispensary, or they become employees. So it is a little bit different, where I guess we're seeing a lot of New Mexicans or farm and landowners coming forward to dispensaries, and they're like, hey...
So they get paid more like by the dispensary for their work as opposed to their flower.
I think it's more the fact that a lot of the farmers we've seen in New Mexico are coming from other types of crops they've tried growing and had a lot of unsuccess or just not a lot of luck with the market right now and everything going on, that they realized they had the land and everything needed to help grow cannabis, and they just didn't realize it all this time. So some people are barely now clicking like, I could have been growing cannabis on our TO's land for So it's weird that we're seeing this rush, but the conditions have to be right, security has to be right, the land, the soil, everything has to be still right. Point. You can't just take some land out of the mountains and be like,
anybody could grow crappy weed.
That's
but
totally
to grow
true.
quality medical cannabis, that's a whole other level.
Requires a totally bit more setup.
And there's a lot of safety to that. And when we're talking about safety, I know that I had made a video about quality cartridges, and hey, no worries, we're on raw footage, so the wife is home.
Welcome back.
Raw footage, we're all good.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of issues I've seen on the news about the safety of vaping, and they're trying to link a lot of that to THC. Recently, they found back that it's a vitamin E oil that's being added to street cartridges, not the medical ones that you pick up at a dispensary. So, I mean, when you talk to a patient, when a patient comes in with that concern, like, oh, bro, I heard bad things about this. I don't know if I want to try that.
A lot of scary binders out there, filling agents out there. A lot of people just trying to make money off of easy technology. I mean, you can buy these empty cartridges off bulk, off lines so easy, and fill them with honestly whatever you want. And a lot of people try and take advantage of patients or people with not a lot of money off that. And unfortunately, you pay a little bit more for a cartridge sometimes because you're paying for testing. And that's part of the reason that's important, because you're paying for a lab result. You're paying for something that's been on this oil before. I know our lab that makes all of our oils, Boda Labs specifically, they have a very strict guideline of everything they will use, any kind of whatever that goes into the process. It's very strict. Boda's put out several statements. They give tours about this. They've had their chemists talk about it some, but I know Alejandro's been another great person who's actually been putting out some statements about the quality of their oil, and even high five with Brianna's oil, her naked oil. people are kind of aware in our community. I think we can tell when an oil is not the best, or the ingredient list is a little too long on that label you're buying, and you start recognizing things that are in your oil that shouldn't be there at all. And it's just like any other medication or food you would eat. You have to look at those ingredients sometimes and be like, what is this?
What am I putting in my body?
Hey, exactly.
This is my temple. What am I doing to it?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, so I see two different colors of oil here.
Yeah, we got a nice distillate on the gold.
They don't move or anything, right?
No, the distillate will be a little bit thicker, I think, and a little bit harder. The full spectrum is going to move a little bit around more loosely.
Okay.
The full spectrum I love, quite frankly, because you get more of that terp flavor. I feel like I taste more off of these than I do like the distillate cartridges, just because, of course, like what it strips down and does during the process.
I've noticed people who have like asthma issues and stuff like that. They say that these full spectrums are a lot smoother for them to hit.
I hear that. I hear the 1-to-1 cartridges are really nice for them as well, with a little bit of that CBD in there. I know that we're hopefully looking to get a 1-on-1 cartridge coming very soon here at Everest. So definitely, patients ask. We're listening.
Yeah, better pay attention. So I definitely have a question too. How do you tell the difference between this and something that somebody would try to sell you off the street?
Honestly, for me, it all comes down to my experience of how I purchase and procure my medication.
Yeah.
If I even know, like, a friend of mine or someone, or they're trying to sell me a packaged product, it's like, what testing has there been on it? And if they're just like, none, I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm not touching that. Like, if I'm going to purchase any type of thing like this that's been made professionally at a lab, I want to see testing on it. Like anything
Well, how do you
medical.
think a new patient would tell though? Like how could a
New patients need to really look at packaging, just like with anything you would buy from a pharmacy, that would show some type of milligram dosaging, testing information, maybe even a date produced, like a weight, a 5 milligram, 1 gram cartridge, something that will let you know specific details of that product. So looking for product labeling information on your cartridges. I know it's too easy to get gifted cartridges from people and things of that nature, and that's where it becomes a little bit more scary, I think, at that point, because people are being generous with stuff they may produce at home, and a lot of labs will test stuff for free, oil batches for free for patients. So
Really?
Rio Grande Analytics, I think they might charge a fee now per sample, and they might limit them by how many samples they can do. But
they'll test the oil for
you. You might have to pay a fee. They'll process, but you can get your product as a personal PPL grower, and anything you grow or produce, you can get tested out of New Mexico lab. So that's the main thing, is getting your product tested. So even if a patient comes to you, it's almost a legal liability and protection on yourself for gifting that person something. Because if you say I gift this blank cartridge to a patient, and then that patient goes, and then they suddenly are like, oh no, I have a disease, or I'm having to go to the hospital, and I feel like it was that cartridge you gave me. Yeah. How are you going to protect yourself if that then patient wants to come after you legally, saying that I don't know what you gave me, I don't know what was in that cartridge or that oil, you gave that person a substance at that point that possibly could have made them sick or caused them harm. Yeah. That's a situation where you can put yourself in like a lawsuit situation. So having that lab testing information of being like, this is exactly what's in that oil, this is exactly what you're getting, kind of thing. Pretty much like that's a lot of the reason where I go to dispensaries. I will straight up ask to see lab testing information. If it's not on your packaging, your dispensary, of your percentages, if it's very vague, and that's another thing with a lot of those black market cartridges, you won't see a flat out percentage number sometimes, or when you do, it's a very number that would be highly suspicious, like 99 or 100% THC. So I mean, not in a cartridge for $20. So I mean, it's just one of those things that you have to use some common sense and some general safety on as a patient. Just because
it's cheaper doesn't mean it's quality.
Yes, exactly. And just because it's overpriced doesn't mean it's quality either. But knowing your product, knowing the information you're looking for will help.
Definitely. That really covered like a lot, I think, on the video, because I think the news, the media really just is very. They're very, I don't know, I guess vague, like you say, they're very vague about it. There's just very little, all you hear is, oh, it's linked to THC and vitamin E.
Yes.
So it's like, wait.
And the media, we know, does sometimes blow things out of proportion, and I know it's something a lot of people just don't have a comfortable subject on, and since we don't really have a federal regulation, and each state can be so different state by state, yeah. I know we just have to worry about the quality, and luckily at Everest we don't have to worry about that, because Boda Labs, who makes a lot of our oil, and then PAX, that we actually do all of our pods with, they have a very high and strict standard of testing, we cannot even fill oil into one of these PAX pods unless it has been separately tested. PAX is very strict about knowing the quality and standards of all the oil that's going into a product of theirs, so I commend PAX for being so strict about their patient safety standards, especially with everything going on in the vaping industry right now. So I know that at Everest, provided by Boda and our PAX pods, we really don't have to worry about our products because they are tested for safety, strength, everything. I mean, we test them to make sure they are safe. We are serving medical patients. We are medical patients, and we wouldn't want to consume this stuff if it was not safe for ourselves.
Absolutely love these PAX pods, man. I mean, since we've been hanging out, we just killed another battery. So we drained three batteries for the pens, but
the packs are still going.
They're still going. They're still burning.
Something can be said about that packs.
Yeah, and not only are they burning, but they're burning at very good quality, and I really enjoy the packs. Thank you to Everest for that's where I picked these up. I went and bought those. So I have one last question here, kind of for you is. There's a lot of people who really want to get into the medical cannabis community out here in New Mexico.
Yes.
I've even had people ask me if this is my way of getting into the industry. I'm 100% disabled. I'm sick. I ain't going to work nowhere.
No.
This is my way of educating and passing on information to other patients through my experiences. But I do have a lot of people who ask me all the time, man, how can I get into helping people? How can I get into a dispensary where I can help people? And I'm like, man, other than applying, I honestly don't know.
Honestly, best place to start applying is always education and training. Side note, I do train for Canna staffing, so of course you can register for our services. We can help give you some of that education, your certification, your background checks, your HIPAA, all that stuff. So by the time you walk into a dispensary, you're already one step ahead general applications that are pretty much going in there blindly without having any of that other forethought or training. So I have noticed some difference in the level of candidates that we sometimes see between people who have gone through training and education, whether it be Canna Staffing or Oaksterdam or another formal cannabis education institute, versus some of our other candidates that have also never taken any type of training, or you can tell just haven't taken that knowledge. Because if you're going to go interview for a dispensary, you have to realize you're going to be asked some basic cannabis questions. So if you've never taken that time to research and you just love consuming cannabis, the interview's not going to go very well for you, because we do take care of patients. We do have a lot of responsibility and reliability with that. So we have to make sure that everyone that is behind the counter has been trained, or if they don't have a full understanding of a product or how something works to help someone, they need more training. And quite frankly, none of us have a full amount of training. Even Veritas Foundation, I know they used to be run by nurses. They were always training, and it's because we're always learning more. There's always more.
Never stops.
It never ends, especially in cannabis, where more studies are always done, more regulations are lifted and bans on studies. So it's something that's always coming forward more, and we just have to keep that in mind, that it's something that's never ending when it comes to that. And as far as wanting to be involved in the cannabis industry, just start. If you've got the passion and the drive and the motivation, I'm a big believer of doing what you love. That's exactly what I feel like I'm doing in this industry. And quite frankly, I got lucky in being hired in a time in New Mexico before Canna Staffing was lucky enough to exist. Rachel from Sacred Garden at the time, honestly, we connected. She knew I had the passion. She knew my education wasn't all there. She trained me herself with Daniel Scharf and Ashley. And if it wasn't for those three awesome leaders that I had to me at that time, it was literally, they took their time to make me and help me get to where I am today, along with everything else, along with my own education and drive and study. But it takes people sometimes willing to invest that time with you, but you've got to show that initiative and that drive first. So take some, study, learn something more about the program. And I know a lot of people aren't able to sometimes get access into our industry right now, specifically on your record. If you've had a possession charge, a trafficking charge of cannabis or narcotics in any specific way, it's usually going to keep you from not being able to be hired by the dispensary. That's on the DOH not approving that hiring application. That's not on the dispensary. We can't. At the end of the day, we can't really say who we want to hire freely, because if the DOH does not approve you for your state badge, you're not getting hired at a dispensary. And unfortunately, that's the one charge the DOH has made pretty clear they will not work with. You can have a DUI, DWI, get hired at a dispensary for some reason, but you cannot have a trafficking or possession charge. And I know some people that have amazing knowledge and skill, and they were caught possessing that cannabis, will now be kind of blocked out of it. And I know there's some kind of movement, and we've seen a lot of people trying to get the DOH to change that.
Yes.
We've seen a lot of social equity talk about how can we get people involved in cannabis that kind of deserve to be in cannabis. Or
sorry guys, we kind of got a little cut off there. All right, so picking up where we left off, we were talking about, like you said, don't stop trying to apply to get into this community, into this field. Don't stop educating yourself. Definitely don't stop training and educating. Do as much as you can. Watch out for all the cannabis staff, all the training. Watch out for all the one-on-one classes and seminars that people are putting out at different places. The more knowledge and experience that you have under your belt, the more that you can put down on your resume, the more likely you're going to get noticed for it. So,
and I mean, you got to shop around just like any other school or training you would go to. I mean, you've got to find what's right for you. I mean, some people like Oaksterdam, some people like Canna Staffing, some people like we have the Canna Clinicians here in New Mexico that also do their training certifications. So it's really just a variety of where you feel comfortable with. I've known people that have gotten hired with all 3 different types of training or certifications. I know some people that have got hired at dispensaries with no training or no background, just simply because someone took the time and the effort to train that person. And I have done it myself because I realize the full potential in some people sometimes, and I know not everyone's been lucky with money or time or education, so you've got to be able to pay it back sometimes. And I just know that if you have that drive, you have that passion, it's usually pretty easy to see. I've been hiring for a few different dispensaries for years in New Mexico, and just some of the best advice I can really say is be prepared for your interview, be ready, be engaged, don't show up fully medicated that you can't talk your way through a conversation.
Just work medicated.
Yes, I know we are a dispensary, but it is something you just have to be prepared. It's very competitive out there as well right now with people that are trying to get into dispensaries. We're seeing a lot of people now get into our industry that are coming over from corporate sectors, legal sectors, I mean, law enforcement sectors. We're seeing people that never would work in cannabis now trying to get involved in cannabis.
Well, did they even talk about when taxing it, giving some of it back to like the police department?
Yes, New Mexico law enforcement is going to get a cut. I believe it was at $1,000 per officer in the state of New Mexico. But if that helps them be better trained on how to interact with patients in our program, then they need that. So
yeah, definitely when dealing with the patient on the streets, please be patient with them.
Yes, be courteous with New Mexico law enforcement. Remember, if you ever get into a sticky situation with them as a patient and you feel uncomfortable, show them that number on the back of your patient card for the 24-hour DOH hotline and be like, sir, ma'am, if you have any questions or if there's anything I'm not answering, please call this number and someone from the DOH can talk to you right now.
Exactly. And just cooperate, man. Don't be an ass, because then people be an ass back.
Yes.
But I mean, man, we've really covered a lot in this. I really appreciate. Man, I feel like all the gray areas have been colored in.
I know it's hard to condense some of these conversations and stay on topic when there's like so many related little things that sometimes come into one of these subjects.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of like spiders off, and it's like, well, this is all part of one thing. And it is all part of one thing. It's part of one community, and that's our community. We are New Mexico's medical cannabis patients. And we need to all come together, and we need to all encourage. We don't need to discourage. And seriously, this is how we push to get more of those laws, how we push to get more of our medicine, so us as patients don't have to worry that when it goes to adult use, are we going to have enough medication for us? You don't have to worry about that. And one more thing I want to make sure is that I hope they do change the law to where a cannabis patient can bear arms for safety. I mean, is there a gray area there still?
I think there's a very gray area there. I know we have some instructors here in New Mexico that are medical cannabis patients, and they do train people on how to get their concealed carry, which I know I heard was not allowed technically, or they're not supposed to be doing that, but it's happening. And I know patients do buy guns at gun shows here in New Mexico, because at gun shows they're not asking if you're a medical cannabis patient when you buy your card. So
they're just gonna get paid.
Definitely, there's a little bit of gray ambiguity when it comes to patients and guns, and I know a lot of patients don't believe you can have a gun. I know a lot of patients feel like they need to disclose that when you're asked on the form, but it just really depends. I know that we have some patients that are some people that work in our industry. specifically medical cannabis, that will not get their patient card because they've come from law enforcement sectors, and they're afraid that by doing so that could interfere with either security clearances, federal clearances. So definitely it concerns a lot of different people that do hold some of those safety sensitive or permits for deadly weapons. But at that point, I think it's just what you kind of need more, quite honestly. Do you need those guns? Do you need the cannabis more? And if it puts you in a weird situation or a predicament you might not want to be in, I think those are all the things you have to think about.
You really got to take into consideration there's still federal laws.
Yes, and federal, of course, we all have to be aware of. So.
Yeah. But yeah, so definitely, Cullen, man, I don't know, 1,000 thank yous. This has been such a great interview. I mean, it went exactly how I would hoped it would, and I hope we got so much information out there to share with patients, new patients, current patients. I mean, there's a lot changing in this community. It's growing, and it's growing fast, and I've come to notice that, especially now that I've started doing this channel. I've started meeting more people, and it's kind of like when I was in the Harley Davidson community. You just meet more people, and it grows. And when you're in the cannabis community, whoa! I'm telling you, whoa! When I first got in here, I was like, oh man, am I the only one doing this? No, I'm not. There's several people out there. There's groups of people out there. And I think we need to all do this more together. Let's all get together. I would love to meet every single person in the cannabis community in this state.
Hey, we all got to break the stigma every day. We all got to help each other out. Remember, this medication is about healing and love, everyone. So that toxicity, that other stuff, got to go. It's not good for any of us. It's not good for the plants. It's not good for us as human beings.
This is medicine right here, and this medicine unites. It brings people together. We are called the United States of America. So to end this off, we're going to light up this king-size hybrid right here, and we're going to unite.
Yes, patient to patient.
Patient to patient. I thank you, everybody, for your time ahead of time, and we look forward to the future. We'll see you next time.
Later, everyone. Thank you.